After a biker kicks his dog, The Rock's calm breaks. Watch how he defends Buddy and delivers justice. On a busy film set where Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was working on a new scene, The Rock, always down to earth, decided to take a well-deserved break. He wanted to bond with Buddy, a pit bull that had been featured in their film scenes. Buddy was calm and friendly, but he was also a little hot and tired from the long hours on set. Rather than staying on the crowded set, The Rock thought it would be a great idea to take Buddy for a walk through the quiet streets of Brooklyn Heights. The Rock clipped a leash onto Buddy's collar and gently led him away from the cameras. As they walked side by side, The Rock spoke softly to Buddy, enjoying the peaceful moment. It was just him and his new four-legged friend, far from the chaos of the set. Buddy, the pit bull, was panting from the heat. The Rock kept a close eye on Buddy, noticing how thirsty the dog was. They walked a little further down the street, and soon, they came across a public water fountain. Buddy hurried over, his tongue hanging out as he eagerly drank the cool water. The Rock stood nearby, keeping watch and enjoying the moment of peace. The sound of motorcycles suddenly filled the air, and The Rock turned to see a row of bikes parked outside a nearby biker bar. The bar was rowdy, with loud voices coming from inside and bikers standing outside, some leaning on their bikes while others stood in groups, chatting and laughing. As The Rock and Buddy continued to rest near the fountain, The Rock noticed a few bikers staring at them. One of them, a huge man with a thick beard and a leather vest, glanced at Buddy with a scowl. The man mumbled something under his breath that The Rock couldn't quite hear, but it was clear from the way he looked at Buddy that it wasn't friendly. The Rock didn't pay much attention to it at first. After all, it wasn't unusual for people to stare when they saw him, but something about this man's look made him uneasy. The biker's eyes narrowed, and he turned to a few others standing nearby, his voice growing louder. "That dog looks like trouble," the man said, his tone full of judgment. The other bikers glanced over at Buddy, and a few of them chuckled, clearly not impressed. Buddy, still drinking from the fountain, didn't seem to notice the bikers' glares. But The Rock could feel the tension growing. It wasn't just the words, it was the way the bikers were looking at Buddy. The Rock had been around enough to know when trouble was brewing, and he wasn't about to let these men cause any harm to his dog. "Come on, Buddy," The Rock muttered, trying to keep things calm. He gently tugged on the leash, pulling Buddy away from the fountain. But just as he was about to move away, the burly man stepped forward, blocking their path. The Rock felt the air change, the tension rising in an instant. "You better get that mutt under control," the man said with a sneer. "A dog like that could turn on anyone." The Rock took a deep breath, keeping his voice even. "He's just thirsty. We're leaving now." He gave the man a hard stare, hoping to end the conversation there. But the biker wasn't done. "He doesn't look like a good dog. Bet he's got a mean streak," the man continued, his voice growing louder. "I wouldn't trust a dog like that. And I sure wouldn't trust you." The Rock stood still for a moment, watching the man. Buddy, now finished drinking, looked up at The Rock, his tail wagging slightly. The Rock stroked Buddy's head and kept his eyes on the man. "You don't know anything about him," he said quietly. "So keep walking, and let's not make this worse." The man didn't move at first, but after a long pause, he stepped aside, mumbling something under his breath. The Rock gave a quick nod to the other bikers who were now watching, their faces a mix of curiosity and amusement. With Buddy safely by his side, The Rock turned and continued walking, his steps firm. He couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't over yet, but for now, they had made it out without trouble. The peaceful walk they had planned was turning into something more complicated, but The Rock wasn't going to let anyone intimidate him or his dog. As Buddy finished drinking from the fountain, The Rock gently patted him on the head, ready to move on. But just as they were about to leave, the burly biker from earlier took a few steps forward. Without warning, the man raised his boot and kicked Buddy in the side. Buddy yelped in pain, jumping back from the unexpected hit. The loud sound of the kick echoed through the quiet street, and in an instant, everything around them changed. Buddy started barking loudly, clearly upset by the attack, his tail tucked between his legs. The noise drew the attention of several people nearby, and a few of the bikers turned to watch. The Rock's blood boiled with anger. His protective instincts kicked in. Buddy was his responsibility, and no one was going to hurt him without facing consequences. But despite the surge of anger, the Rock kept his cool. He knew that reacting with violence would only make things worse. Without saying a word, the Rock stepped in between the biker and Buddy, blocking the man's path. He stood tall, towering over the biker. His expression was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The Rock's voice was steady, but it carried a weight that made the air feel thick. The biker laughed, clearly unfazed. "What's the big deal, man? It's just a dog," he said, sneering. "You shouldn't be so soft." He took a step closer to the Rock, trying to push him back, but the Rock didn't budge. The Rock looked at him calmly, his gaze unflinching. "You don't hurt animals for fun," he said. His voice was low, controlled, but filled with a warning. "And you definitely don't mess with my dog." The biker, still mocking, didn't realize who he was dealing with. He laughed even louder, clearly not recognizing the Rock. "What are you gonna do about it, tough guy?" The Rock's jaw tightened. He knew that this wasn't just about the biker. This was about showing him that there were lines you didn't cross. Without raising his voice, the Rock placed his hand on Buddy's back, gently comforting the dog. "I'll handle this. Just stay calm, Buddy," he murmured, keeping his focus on the biker. The tension in the air was thick, and the crowd of bikers and bystanders stood silently, watching to see what would happen next. The Rock stood tall, his presence alone making the biker pause. Buddy, still shaken from the kick, stood close to him, his tail low and his eyes filled with confusion. The Rock gently patted the dog's head, trying to reassure him, but his attention remained on the biker, who was now sneering at him. "Listen, man," the Rock said calmly, trying to keep his voice even. "You've got no reason to take it out on my dog. If you've got a problem with me, fine, but leave Buddy out of it." His words were firm, but there was a clear warning in his voice. He wasn't about to let this go, not after what had just happened. The biker, however, wasn't interested in backing down. He took a step closer, his eyes challenging the Rock's. "You think your dog is special? Look at him, he's just a mutt," he sneered, clearly taunting the Rock. "And you? You're just a big guy who thinks he's tough. But you don't scare me." The Rock's blood began to boil, but he kept his calm. He had been in tough situations before, and he knew how to handle them. "It's not about being tough," the Rock said, his voice steady but low. "It's about loyalty. You hurt my dog, and you've crossed a line. I don't care who you are or what you think, but if you touch him again, you're going to regret it." The biker laughed, taking another step forward. "What are you gonna do, huh? Talk me to death?" He took another swing, clearly not taking the Rock seriously. He didn't realize who he was messing with. He thought he could intimidate the big guy, but it was clear the Rock wasn't backing down. The Rock's eyes locked with the bikers, and the air around them seemed to grow tense. "You're right about one thing," the Rock said, his voice cold and sharp. "I am tough. But I'm also not stupid. You can keep pushing, but I'm telling you right now, don't mess with my dog. I'm loyal to him, and that loyalty isn't something you can just walk over." The biker, still smirking, stood there for a moment, considering his next move. The Rock's words were serious, and the crowd was starting to take notice. They could see the tension between the two men, and it was clear that this wasn't going to end well for the biker if he didn't back off. "Last chance," the Rock said, his voice dropping even lower. Leave Buddy alone, or this will not end well for you. For a moment, the biker stood still, staring at the rock. Then, with a scoff, he finally stepped back. Whatever, man. Your dog's lucky you're here, he muttered, before turning to walk away. The rock watched him go, making sure the man didn't try anything else. As the biker disappeared into the distance, the rock took a deep breath and turned to Buddy. He crouched down to the dog's level, gently stroking his fur. You're safe now, Buddy. Let's go home. Buddy wagged his tail slightly, seeming to understand that the rock had protected him. They both walked away, leaving the scene behind, with the rock's eyes still sharp, making sure the situation didn't escalate further. The tension in the air was thick. The biker, clearly not intimidated by the rock's warning, took a few more steps forward, pushing his luck. He stared down at the rock with a sneer, clearly trying to provoke him further. You think you're the big man around here? I don't care how tough you think you are. You're just a guy with a dog, the biker taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. The rock's patience was wearing thin. He had tried to keep the situation under control, to avoid any violence, but this man just wouldn't stop. With every word, the biker seemed to push the rock closer to his breaking point. The crowd around them had gone silent, watching with bated breath. Some were whispering to each other, while others just stood still, unsure of what was about to happen. They all knew that something big was about to go down. The rock took a deep breath, his muscles tense, but still he remained calm. I warned you, he said quietly, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. You don't mess with my dog, and you don't push me like this. Walk away. But the biker wasn't done. With a laugh, he shoved the rock's shoulder, trying to make him lose his balance. You think I'm scared of you, he said, grinning as he shoved harder. I've fought bigger guys than you. The rock's calm expression never wavered, but something inside him snapped. Without a word, he reached out and grabbed the biker by the collar, his large hand closing around the man's shirt with a firm grip. The biker tried to pull away, but the rock's strength was overwhelming. The crowd gasped, their eyes wide as they watched the two men face off. The biker struggled, trying to push the rock away, but his efforts were useless. The rock didn't move, his feet planted firmly on the ground, his grip unshakable. You don't want to do this, the rock said, his voice low and calm. You can keep talking, but I'm not going to let you hurt anyone. Especially not Buddy. The biker's face twisted with anger, and for a brief moment, he looked like he might try to swing at the rock. But before he could, the rock tightened his grip, lifting the man slightly off the ground with ease. The biker's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't expected the rock to be this strong. You're not in control here, the rock said, his voice steady but firm. I am. Now you're going to listen, and you're going to walk away. Or I'll make you. The biker tried to fight back, swinging his fists, but the rock easily avoided the punches. With a final growl, the biker gave up, realizing he was no match for the rock. He slumped in the rock's grip, his face red with frustration and fear. Good choice, the rock said, slowly releasing the biker. He pushed the man back gently, but with enough force to send him stumbling. The biker backed off, glaring at the rock, but he didn't try anything else. The rock stood tall, watching the biker retreat. He didn't move until the man was well away, and the crowd began to murmur, clearly relieved that the situation had been defused. The rock turned back to Buddy, who was now sitting quietly at his feet, tail wagging slightly. Let's go, Buddy, the rock said, his voice softening as he bent down to pet the dog. They both turned and walked away, leaving the tense situation behind them, with the rock's calm demeanor finally returning to normal. The crowd, still watching, let out a collective sigh of relief as they saw the rock and Buddy walk off into the distance. As the rock held the biker by the collar, something about the man's leather vest caught his eye. On the back, there was a logo of a snarling wolf, its sharp teeth bared in an aggressive pose. The logo wasn't just a random design, it triggered something in the Rock's mind. He'd seen that symbol before, on a group of bikers that had been causing trouble in the neighborhood for weeks. This man wasn't just some random guy, he was part of a dangerous gang known for their violent behavior. The realization hit the Rock like a punch to the gut. He had already sensed that the situation was escalating, but now it made sense. This wasn't just a simple confrontation, it was a confrontation with a gang that had been intimidating people around Brooklyn Heights. The gang had been known for their illegal activities, and now they had gone too far by attacking his dog. The Rock's grip on the biker tightened for a moment as he processed the information. The biker's earlier cocky attitude now made sense. He didn't just think he could get away with bullying a dog, he was used to getting away with much worse. The gang's logo on the biker's vest was a sign of that. It wasn't just about Buddy anymore, it was about protecting the whole neighborhood from people like this. As the Rock looked into the biker's eyes, his anger flared briefly, but his calm returned. He wasn't going to lose control. With a firm push, he released the biker, letting him stumble back onto the sidewalk. The biker blinked, his face still twisted with anger, but he was starting to realize just how outmatched he was. The Rock's expression hardened as he stood tall, looking down at the biker. "You don't mess with a man's dog," he said, his voice steady and cold. The words were clear, carrying the weight of his warning. The biker opened his mouth to respond, but the Rock didn't give him a chance. "Walk away," the Rock added, his tone unyielding. The biker didn't hesitate this time. With a final glare, he turned and walked off, realizing he wasn't going to get the reaction he had been hoping for. The Rock stood there for a moment, watching the biker leave. His thoughts raced, but he remained calm. He had protected Buddy, and now he had to make sure the rest of the gang was dealt with. But for now, his focus was on Buddy, who stood quietly beside him, looking up with trust in his eyes. As the Rock held the biker, he noticed something on the man's leather vest. There was a logo of a snarling wolf, its sharp teeth showing in a menacing way. This wasn't just a random design, the Rock recognized it. He had seen that same logo before. It was the symbol of a dangerous biker gang that had been causing trouble around Brooklyn Heights. They were known for their aggressive behavior, threats, and violent acts. The realization hit the Rock fast. This wasn't just some random troublemaker, this man was part of a gang that had been terrorizing the area. The Rock could feel his anger rising, but at the same time, he stayed focused. He had to think carefully now. This situation was bigger than he thought. The biker wasn't just picking on Buddy, he was part of a much larger problem. The biker was still struggling in the Rock's grip, trying to push himself free, but he wasn't going anywhere. The Rock's grip tightened for a moment as he thought about everything, the gang, their history of violence, and what this moment meant. This wasn't just about protecting his dog anymore. It was about standing up to a larger threat that had been intimidating the neighborhood. The Rock's calm returned as he let the biker go. He stood up straight, his eyes hardening with determination. He looked down at the man, who was trying to gather himself and still look tough. But the Rock wasn't having it. "You don't mess with a man's dog," the Rock said, his voice firm and serious. The words were clear, and they weren't just a warning to this one biker. They were a message to anyone who thought they could mess with what mattered to him. The biker opened his mouth, ready to say something, but the Rock didn't give him the chance. The Rock had said what he needed to say, and he wasn't going to waste any more time. The biker backed off, his face filled with anger and fear. The Rock turned his attention back to Buddy, making sure the dog was okay. The situation was far from over, but for now, Buddy was safe. The Rock was ready to handle whatever came next. As soon as the confrontation ended, people in the crowd started calling the police. They had seen everything unfold and knew that the situation needed attention. The sound of sirens soon filled the air, growing louder as the police cars approached. A few moments later, several police officers arrived on the scene, quickly taking control of the situation. The officers wasted no time. They moved in to arrest the bikers, handcuffing them one by one. The gang members were clearly caught off guard, their tough attitudes disappearing as they realized they were going to face serious consequences. The police quickly gathered evidence, and it became clear that this group was involved in illegal activities that had been causing problems in the area for weeks. The Rock watched as the bikers were led away by the police. His anger, which had been so strong just moments before, slowly started to melt away. He felt a sense of relief knowing that the gang would be dealt with and that they wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else. Justice was being served, and The Rock felt proud of how the situation had been handled. After the bikers were taken away, The Rock turned his attention back to Buddy. The dog had been through a lot, and The Rock knew he needed to make sure Buddy was okay. He walked over to Buddy, who was now sitting quietly by the fountain, his tail wagging a little. The Rock knelt down beside him, gently running his hand through the dog's fur. "You okay, Buddy?" The Rock asked softly, his voice full of concern. Buddy looked up at him with trusting eyes, his earlier fear fading away. The Rock smiled, relieved to see that Buddy was doing better. The dog wasn't hurt badly, but the fear from the confrontation was still visible in his eyes. The Rock petted Buddy's head and spoke to him in a calm voice, letting him know that everything was going to be fine. "You're safe now," he said. "I've got you." The dog responded by licking the Rock's hand, as if to show his appreciation for the comfort. The Rock stood up, keeping Buddy close by his side. He was grateful that things hadn't escalated further, and he was determined to make sure Buddy felt safe. Together, they walked away from the scene, ready to head back to the set, where the calm and peace of their next scene awaited. As The Rock walked away from the scene, Buddy by his side, he couldn't help but reflect on everything that had just happened. The confrontation with the biker had been intense, and the anger that had built up inside him had been hard to control. But as the bikers were arrested and led away, he felt a sense of calm return. The situation was over, but the feeling of protecting Buddy lingered with him. The Rock thought about how quickly things had escalated. What had started as a simple walk with Buddy had turned into a fight to defend his dog and, in a way, defend what was right. He had stayed calm when it counted, but he had also shown that he wasn't afraid to stand up to those who thought they could hurt others without consequences. He felt proud that he had been able to protect Buddy, but he also knew this wasn't just about one dog. It was about all animals that can't defend themselves. The Rock thought about the other animals out there who might not have someone to stand up for them, someone to protect them when they were in danger. That thought stuck with him as he continued to walk. He made a promise to himself right then and there. He promised that he would keep fighting for what was right. He would continue to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Whether it was animals or people, The Rock knew he couldn't just sit by and let cruelty happen without taking a stand. "Buddy, I'll always be here for you," he said softly, looking down at the dog who had become more than just a co-star on a film set. He had become a symbol of everything The Rock was willing to fight for. He made a vow that no matter what, he would always stand up for what was right and make sure no one could hurt those who needed help the most. As they reached the set, The Rock's mind was clear. The battle wasn't over, but today he had made a difference, and that was all he needed to know. He would keep fighting for the helpless, and he would never stop. Later that evening, as The Rock was finishing up his work on the film set, his phone buzzed. He picked it up and saw that he had a message from the police. His heart skipped a beat as he opened it, hoping for some good news. The message was from one of the officers who had been involved in the arrest of the bikers. The police had gathered enough evidence to charge the gang members with several crimes, including animal cruelty. The message went on to say that the bikers would be facing serious consequences for their actions. The Rock couldn't help but feel a wave of relief wash over him. Buddy had been hurt that day, but now The Rock knew that the people responsible would be held accountable. He had seen the anger and violence in those bikers, but now, thanks to the police, they would face justice. The Rock felt proud that his actions had helped bring the situation to an end, but it was the legal system that would ensure that the bikers wouldn't hurt anyone else. The Rock took a deep breath and looked over at Buddy, who was lying on the ground next to him, his tail wagging gently. The dog had come through the ordeal, and now he seemed calm and content. The Rock reached down and scratched Buddy's head, feeling grateful that the dog was safe. Knowing that justice would be served made everything feel a little easier. The Rock had done what he needed to do in the moment, but now it was in the hands of the authorities to ensure that the bikers wouldn't continue to cause harm. The gang was known for their illegal activities, and now, with charges of animal cruelty on the table, they would face the consequences of their actions. As The Rock sat down, he thought about the day's events. What had started as a simple walk had turned into something much bigger. But in the end, things had worked out. Buddy was okay, the bikers were arrested, and justice was on its way. The Rock felt at peace, knowing that he had done the right thing. The message from the police also mentioned that they would be keeping an eye on the gang, making sure that their criminal activities were stopped for good. That made The Rock smile, knowing that the neighborhood would be safer because of the actions that had been taken. As the day wound down, The Rock sent a quick reply to the police, thanking them for their hard work and dedication. It was clear that justice had been served, and that made The Rock feel like he had done his part to make the world a little better for Buddy and for others. He stood up and gave Buddy one last pat before heading back to work, knowing that, for today, everything had turned out right. The Rock walked back towards the film set with Buddy by his side. The day had been full of tension, but now it felt like things were finally calming down. The biker gang was gone, justice was being served, and Buddy was safe. The bond between The Rock and Buddy had always been special, but after everything that had happened, it felt even stronger now. What started as just a film set partnership had turned into a deep, trusting friendship. They had faced a difficult situation together, and in doing so, they had formed an unbreakable connection. As they walked side by side, The Rock couldn't help but smile down at Buddy, who was trotting happily next to him. The dog seemed more relaxed now, his earlier fear gone. Buddy had been through a lot, but he was resilient. The Rock admired the dog's strength, and it made him feel even more protective of him. "You did good today, Buddy," The Rock said, his voice warm and full of affection. Buddy looked up at him with trusting eyes, his tail wagging gently. The Rock smiled, feeling a sense of pride. He had fought for Buddy, not just because the dog was part of the film, but because Buddy was more than just a pet on a set, he was a friend. As they approached the set, The Rock noticed how different everything seemed now. The busy chaos of the film set was still there, but the atmosphere had changed. The tension from earlier had lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and peace. The crew was wrapping up for the day, and some of them greeted The Rock as he walked by. Buddy, now walking confidently by his side, was getting the attention he deserved. A few of the crew members stopped to give the dog a pat on the head, admiring how calm and well-behaved he had become after the day's events. The Rock watched with a smile as Buddy interacted with the crew, his new confidence showing. The Rock looked down at Buddy one more time, his heart full of gratitude. They had been through a lot together, and now they were heading back to finish their work. Whatever challenges lay ahead, The Rock knew they would face them together. As they walked onto the set, The Rock gave Buddy a final, loving pat on the head. "Let's do this, Buddy," he said with a smile. And with that, they stepped into the next scene, ready to face whatever came next, together.